My mom is currently absolutely blowing up my phone because I refuse to fund my step-siblings' college tuition with my inheritance. My inbox is a toxic wasteland of guilt trips, and honestly, I just need to lay it all out here to prove to myself that I'm not the crazy one. To understand why I flat out refused, you have to understand where this money came from and what my life has been like for the past 13 years. When I was 12 years old, my biological dad passed away. He was a brilliant, quiet guy, an engineer who didn't care about flashy things, but cared immensely about my future. Before he died, he set up a substantial trust fund explicitly for me. It was airtight, locked away under the care of a strict trustee until the day I turned 25. He wanted to make sure I was mature enough to handle it. My mom knew the money existed, but she had absolutely zero access to it. 2 years after my dad passed, my mom met Dave. Looking back, it was a whirlwind romance born out of her desperation not to be alone, and it completely blinded her. Dave brought 2 kids into the mix, Brad, who is now 21, and Chelsea, who is now 19. Dave brought absolutely zero financial stability to the table, no savings, a shaky career, and a mountain of hidden debt, but he made up for it with a massive, fragile ego. The moment Dave and his kids moved into our house, the entire dynamic shifted. It was like a switch flipped. My mom, desperate to keep her new husband happy and play the role of the perfect, blended family, completely erased my biological dad's memory. Pictures of him were packed away into the attic. If I talked about him, I was told I was living in the past. Within months, I was turned into a second-class citizen in my own home. The chores were where the real resentment started. Brad and Chelsea were treated like absolute royalty. They didn't lift a finger. I became the designated maid. I was the one forced to do their laundry, scrub their bathrooms, clean up after their messy weekend parties, and wash a mountain of dishes while they sat on the living room couch, staring at their phones and laughing. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself or ask why they weren't helping, Dave would puff out his chest and call me selfish and uncooperative. My mom would pull me aside later, crying tears of manipulation, accusing me of trying to ruin her new family. It wasn't just the chores, though. It was the psychological bullying. Brad and Chelsea knew they were untouchable. Brad would deliberately walk into my room when I wasn't home, trash it, and mess up my belongings just to see me snap. Chelsea would borrow my clothes, makeup, and electronics without asking, and they'd inevitably come back broken or stained. When I fought back or demanded my things back, I was the one who got punished. I'd get grounded, my internet access would be cut, and I'd be lectured by Dave about how I needed to learn to share. Both step-siblings grew up with severe golden child syndrome. They were incredibly entitled. My mom would bend over backward to buy them designer clothes and eventually decent cars for their birthdays, completely draining her own resources to keep up appearances for Dave. Meanwhile, I was told that if I wanted anything extra, I had to earn it. So, I got a part-time job during high school. Instead of respecting my work ethic, Brad and Chelsea constantly mocked me for it. They would literally call me the hired help and make fun of me for working shifts while they spent their weekends spending my mom's money. Fast forward to last month. I finally turned 25 and my late father's trust fund officially unlocked. It was a life-changing amount of money, enough to buy a nice house outright and invest heavily for a comfortable future. I didn't say a single word to my family about it. I kept it completely quiet, silently planning my permanent exit strategy from their lives. Then came the trap. Out of nowhere, my mom sends me a text inviting me over to their place for a family dinner. This was red flag number 1 because they hadn't invited me over, let alone checked in on me, in months. But I decided to go, mostly out of curiosity to see what they wanted. The dinner started out unsettlingly nice. They were asking about my life, passing the food, acting like the last decade of mistreatment had never happened. Then, midway through the meal, the shoe dropped. Dave cleared his throat, put down his fork, and brought up college. He explained that Brad had dropped out of community college because it wasn't a good fit and now wanted to go to a massively expensive private university out of state. Chelsea, meanwhile, wanted to attend a top-tier fashion school downtown. Dave casually sighed, shook his head, and mentioned that they simply couldn't afford it. My mom then looked me straight in the eye, took a sip of her wine, and said, "Since you just got your dad's money, we think it's only fair that you split it 3 ways. We're a family now, and it's what your step-siblings deserve to get their start in life." I looked across the table. Brad and Chelsea were literally smirking at me, completely smug, already whispering to each other and planning exactly how they were going to spend my dead father's hard-earned cash. They honestly thought they had won. I looked them dead in the eyes, let out a loud laugh, and said, "Absolutely not. Not a single penny." The dinner table completely exploded. The facade of the happy, welcoming family vanished in a fraction of a second. Dave slammed his hand down on the table so hard the plates rattled, his face turning a deep, angry purple as he pointed a finger at me and screamed that I was an ungrateful, selfish brat. My mom instantly burst into tears, covering her face and whispering that she couldn't believe she raised a child this heartless, questioning where she went wrong. Brad sneered across the table, calling me a pathetic, bitter loser who would always be alone, while Chelsea threw a literal temper tantrum. She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it into the kitchen sink, where it shattered into a million pieces, screaming about how I was ruining her entire future. I didn't say another word. I calmly stood up, pushed my chair back, picked up my jacket, and walked out of the house to the sound of them screaming threats at my back. The moment I got into my car, I went down the line and blocked every single one of them on social media. But blocking them on Instagram didn't stop the onslaught. Over the next week, the harassment via text and phone calls was nonstop. They were using TextNow apps, new numbers, and sending flying monkeys after me. My mom sent endless, exhausting paragraphs about family unity, blood being thicker than water, and how my biological dad would be absolutely ashamed of the monster I had become. Dave took a more aggressive route, sending threatening texts claiming that he was going to sue me for back rent, arguing that I owed them for the roof over my head during high school. But amidst the barrage of angry texts, a strange gut feeling started to settle in. Something about their behavior just didn't sit right with me. Why were they so desperate for this money right now? Why the sudden, frantic urgency? For years, Dave had constantly bragged to anyone who would listen about his massively successful consulting business, and my mom always went out of her way to act like they were upper middle class, snobs of the neighborhood. If they were doing so well, why were they begging a 25-year-old for college tuition? I decided it was time to do some digging. Since I still had access to some old family tax documents from when I briefly lived there as an adult, and because random pieces of their mail still accidentally got forwarded to my current address, I had a few starting points. I decided to take a portion of my inheritance and hire a reputable private investigator, while simultaneously doing some deep, obsessive internet sleuthing of my own. What we uncovered over the next few days was absolutely jaw-dropping. The perfect, honest, wholesome step-family was a complete and utter fraud. They weren't middle class, they were a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. First, there was Dave's big secret. The PI discovered that Dave didn't actually have a consulting business anymore. It had gone under 2 years ago. Instead, he was drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt stemming from a severe, hidden gambling addiction. To keep his head above water and fund his lifestyle, he had been systematically embezzling money from his local homeowners association, where he conveniently served as the trusted treasurer. He was panic-stricken because the HOA was planning an independent audit in 2 months. My dad's inheritance was supposed to bail him out of prison. Then came Brad's secret. He hadn't just dropped out of community college because it wasn't a good fit. I managed to get a hold of someone who went to school with him, who pointed me toward a public disciplinary record. Brad had been formally expelled. He had been running a massive academic fraud ring, hiring smarter students to write papers, and then selling those essay papers to wealthy, lazy students for a massive markup. He got caught red-handed, and his academic record was completely fried. No legitimate university would ever touch him. Finally, there was Chelsea's secret. Miss Future Fashionista was running a highly publicized charity page online, allegedly raising money for a local no-kill animal shelter. She regularly posted heartbroken emojis and pictures of rescue dogs to get people to donate to her GoFundMe and Venmo links. The PI tracked the financial trail. Not a single cent of that charity money ever touched an animal shelter. Chelsea was funneling the donation money directly into her personal account to fund her expensive wardrobe, designer shoes, and girls' trips to Miami. When I sat at my desk looking at the pile of bank statements, expulsion letters, and fraudulent screenshots, a cold wave of satisfaction washed over me. They wanted to play dirty? They wanted to smear my name to the extended family and paint me as the greedy villain who abandoned them? Fine. I wasn't just going to say no to them. I was going to strip away their mask of fake honesty in the most public, devastating way possible. I unlocked my mom's number and typed out a text designed to be the ultimate bait. Hey, Mom. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I feel horrible about how I reacted. Let's do a big family dinner this Sunday at that upscale French restaurant downtown. My treat. Bring everyone, including Dave's parents and your closest neighborhood friends. We can sit down like adults and discuss exactly how to distribute my dad's money to the kids. I want to make things right. They took the bait instantly. Within 3 minutes, my mom replied with a flurry of heart emojis, praising me for finally growing up and doing the right thing. The psychological whiplash was hilarious. Suddenly, I wasn't a monster anymore. Later that evening, Chelsea even texted me for the first time in literally 3 years. She didn't ask how I was doing, of course. She just casually asked if I could buy her a brand new MacBook Pro before classes started so she could get a head start. I replied, of course, Chelsea. Anything for family. See you Sunday. I stared at my phone and smiled. They had absolutely no idea they were walking straight into a slaughterhouse. The night of the dinner, I walked into that upscale restaurant with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The place was dripping with ambience, dim lighting, white tablecloths, crystal glasses. I found our table, and there they were, my mom, Dave, Brad, Chelsea, plus Dave's elderly parents, who were clearly under the impression that they were here to witness me gifting away my inheritance. 2 of my mom's neighborhood friends were there too, just to add a layer of audience for the generous brother. The atmosphere was nauseatingly celebratory. Dave had already ordered the most expensive bottle of vintage wine on the menu and was nursing a glass, acting like he was already writing checks for his consulting expenses. Halfway through the main course, Dave decided it was time to make his move. He stood up, tapped his fork against his glass with a smug grin, and launched into a toast. He started talking about family resilience and how proud he was that I was finally stepping up as a real big sis to help his kids achieve their dreams. He kept patting his own back for how he'd raised me to be such a giving person. It was physically painful to sit there and listen to his lies. When he finally sat down, clearly expecting me to pull out a checkbook, I stood up. I didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked around the table. The smile on my face was genuine, but it probably looked like a shark's grin to them. Actually, I said, my voice steady, before we talk about the money, I realized I've been neglectful. I have a few graduation and acceptance gifts for Brad and Chelsea, and a little token of appreciation for Dave. I reached into my bag and pulled out 4 thick, manila envelopes. I slid them across the table one by one, like a dealer tossing cards in a high-stakes game of poker. The room went completely silent as they opened them. The first envelope went to Dave. It contained detailed bank statements and a printed copy of the email I had just sent to the entire HOA board, proving he had funneled $40,000 of community funds into his personal gambling accounts. Dave's face drained of color so quickly he looked like he was about to pass out. He started hyperventilating, his hand shaking so badly he dropped his fork. The second and third envelopes went to Brad and Chelsea. Brad's contained the official expulsion letter from his college, detailing his academic fraud, his history of selling essays, and the university's threat of legal action. He turned a shade of gray I didn't know existed, frantically trying to snatch the papers off the table before his grandparents could see them. Chelsea's envelope was for my mom's friends. It contained screenshots of her group chats bragging about using stolen charity money for her shopping sprees, alongside the bank logs proving the charity never gave a dime to any shelter. I looked directly at my mom, who was sitting there with her mouth agape, holding the evidence of her husband's crimes. You allowed these scammers to treat me like trash in my own home for 10 years, I said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. You wanted my dad's money? You can use it to pay for Dave's upcoming legal fees. I threw a $100 bill on the table, enough to cover only my glass of wine, turned around, and walked out. Behind me, the table erupted into a beautiful, chaotic symphony of screaming, crying, and slamming chairs. Dave's parents looked at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust that made the entire ordeal worth it. The nuclear fallout was absolute. Within 2 weeks, Dave was forced to resign from the HOA board in disgrace, and he's currently facing felony charges for embezzlement. His parents completely cut him off, refusing to pay a single cent for his lawyer. Brad is currently working a dead-end, minimum wage job at a local fast food joint. No legitimate university will touch him with that expulsion record, and his academic fraud scheme has made him a pariah in the local student community. Chelsea's friends abandoned her the moment the charity fraud hit Facebook. She had to delete all her social media after being publicly exposed and ridiculed by the very people she tried to scam. My mom is now living in a nightmare of her own making, stuck in a failing marriage with a man who might be headed to prison, with 2 adult children who have no future. She's tried to call me a lot. She leaves voicemails sobbing, begging for forgiveness, telling me she was just blinded by love. I haven't listened to a single one. I've permanently blocked them all, changed my number, and moved into a beautiful, quiet apartment in a completely different city. My inheritance is safe, invested, and is being used exactly how my dad intended, for my future and my happiness. For the first time in my life, I don't owe anyone anything. And honestly, it feels amazing,